Good morning, everybody. The first panel of the morning at any trade show is a little bit of a tough sentence, both for panelists and for the audience. So thank you very much for coming out to start your morning. In fact, it'd be good to get a sense, I think, for all of us up here, how many folks in the audience are currently involved in the sports industry broadly defined. Okay, that's a good sense. And how many are involved in streaming broadly defined, sports or otherwise? All right, that's great. Well, we're lucky to have a good panel today, a very good panel of international experts, and we'll engage in a variety of questions that really go to the subject that you see up on the screen in front of you, to try to better understand what makes for a top quality, globally based sports streaming platform. We'll talk about streaming services that are focused on, one geography, as well as those who are, which are fully global. And we'll discuss why people set up streaming services, why content owners find that a great way not only to get their content widely distributed, but to understand more about their fans and their fan base. And we'll try to give practical suggestions that are best practices in the world of starting a streaming service, growing it, retaining viewers, etc. With me today are three friends with wide expertise, and I'm not going to give full bios. You should look them up on LinkedIn because their many stops in their career have informed their judgments and are impressive to see. I'm just going to talk about the most recent positions. Ricardo is with LMP, which is the Italian Pro Basketball League. He heads up that service, which is focused in Italy, but has global reach possible to it in its future. Fabio Gallo is the head of product for La Liga Tech. That is the technology arm of La Liga, the Spanish pro soccer league. And then Andy Wassef is the head of strategy and business innovation for the Next Gen project of the NBA. And we're going to explore a little bit what Next Gen is and what it means. But it is an exciting initiative, and I think the most far-sighted of any of the major leagues in the United States in terms of going directly to consumer and looking at the future of digital technology. We're going to try to hit this topic from a lot of different directions. And I know these panelists, so we'll go off in unexpected opportunities as they present themselves. But I think for most sports content owners, leagues, teams, and others, taking a look at how to reach consumers through streaming, the first balancing act is between their linear partners and their own interests in going direct to consumer and streaming, plus the distribution partners that they may have entirely on the streaming side of the distribution spectrum. And I thought I'd start with you, Fabio, because La Liga Pass just opened up in Thailand and Indonesia, two areas where La Liga had linear broadcast partners, but you were able to launch a direct-to-consumer service in those marketplaces. How did you think about that? How did you deal with the media partner involved? And what are the issues that are necessary to get this balanced right?
Yeah, so going direct to consumer for La Liga is probably the next step to many other steps. And the global idea that La Liga has is really to reach global audiences. And when there is no opportunity to go linear, or there is, but probably the penetration in specific countries is not so high, then the appetite to go direct to consumer with a streaming service is clearly a must, right? We launched La Liga Pass in Indonesia pretty much a month ago. we're going to launch in Thailand next month. It's one of the first real soccer league that go direct to consumer with their own solution, proprietary solution that's been built in the last few months. So again, we really want to target global audience. We know that in those particular countries, the audience is young. They have a lot of demand for content, specifically for sports. They are looking for new way of watching, new way of experiencing the live streamings, and we think that is the right direction, even if clearly Southeast Asia to start with is always, a question mark. So we'll see how it goes. So far, so good.
Andy, I'll ask this from the perspective of one of the largest leagues in the world and most powerful in terms of being able to negotiate the relationships with its many broadcast partners and others. How does the NBA think about that balance? And for smaller sports content owners, what's the way to think about balancing their broadcast contracts? Easiest in those territories where they have none, and they're using DTC to fill in a black hole on the map. But if they have linear partners, those linear partners generally demand absolutely all rights and all media within the territory. How do you think about it, and how, in previous positions, have you counseled smaller clients, and how does the NBA think about it now?
So I'd say it's still the million-dollar question, right, in terms of how you get that balance right. We're in a fairly luxury position of, especially domestically here in the US and some other markets, there is such high interest in our rights from traditional media companies and some of the new ones and digital platforms that it puts us in a, I guess, enviable position in terms of negotiations and in terms of what we might want to hold back for ourselves, what we might want to share co-exclusively, what somebody is going to be willing to pay to have it exclusively themselves. So we do have that. From our OTT service, so we recognized 12 years ago now, there was an opportunity for us to go direct to consumer, out of market, domestically and then internationally, where maybe there wasn't quite the same level of demand from the traditional media landscape. So we've done that. We've grown successfully over the last 12 years. We'll continue to grow, and we think there's a lot of opportunity. There's also a lot of uncertainty over the next 3, 4, 5 years as to exactly where the landscape is going to go in terms of the traditional media companies. Many of them have made very smart and expensive moves into streaming and are doing pretty well, right? Between them and some of the digital platforms who have extremely deep pockets, like some of the leagues like the NBA, like the NFL, Premier League, La Liga in Spain, etc., there is still such a high demand for those rights that sometimes economics just kind of too good an offer to turn down. For smaller properties, it's a little bit different, right? It's a weird juxtaposition. For the bigger leagues who have the greatest chance of success with a D2C OTT service in terms of generating the size of audience you need to make that truly profitable and grow that, they're also the ones who are getting the most interest from the traditional media companies, and so there's a little bit of that imperative is reduced somewhat. Whereas in the other end of the spectrum, some of the smaller leagues are not the ones getting the interest. They're the ones who do need to go OTT but don't necessarily have the scale of audience to make the economics work for them in the short term. And it's expensive. Streaming is expensive. It's difficult. Pretty much every service that launches, there's some kind of problem. We've all got battle scars from going through those. So, I think the counsel that we've always given some of the small to mid-sized properties is, what's right for your audience? Where are they? How avid are they? How much are they really willing to pay to consume your product? Can you make the economics work? And if you can, and you can identify that audience and you believe you can grow it to the requisite level, that again will make it profitable, then it's the route to go. If there are other entities looking to buy your rights and take a lot of the headache and provide you with the financial security you need, who are out there willing to pay for it, then you have to also consider that. So it's still, I think, this balancing act, and everyone's still working out exactly, sort of hedging. There's a lot of hedging going on in the market.
I'm going to come back to a couple of those points in a minute, but this may be a good opportunity to ask you about about Next Gen for the NBA, and why don't you describe what that project is and entails in broad terms? I know we can't put the cone of silence over this room, so we're not going to get into depth on things, but if you give an overview.
Yeah, I mean, at the highest level, it's about how we reimagine, redevelop, and relaunch how our fans experience the NBA. Primarily or initially directly through us, but then beyond that, how do we connect the ecosystem that we have for our fans? So we go from a situation which, like many leagues, over time, you license more and more different aspects of all your touch points, and certainly your digital touch points. And from a fan perspective, you end up pretty fragmented, pretty siloed, different logins, you're not recognized and rewarded for what you do here over here. So our idea is we are directly addressing how fan behaviors continue to shift by putting in the infrastructure, the architecture we need to be continually agile in addressing those different needs. If we need to go left because fan behavior is going in a particular direction, we can do so, right? So it's about the technology and the people we need to be able to control our own destiny in that future where there's continual evolution in fan tastes and behaviors and preferences across many micro segments. And it's about connecting our fan ecosystem so it feels very fluid and seamless and frictionless for a fan to navigate across all of those. It doesn't feel like it's multiple entities. It feels like it's all the NBA.
That really turns on focusing on the fan first and being able to have access to the data about their behavior and needs. And that strikes me as one of the principal reasons the content owners go into direct-to-consumer and use streaming technology in the first place to be able to track that fan behavior, understand it, offer new products, and test it in a way that in a traditional license relationship, you have no visibility about your fans. Ricardo, LMP was the first sports property to stream in Italy. What were you looking for in these respects? Were you looking to have direct communication with your fan base? Were you looking to get the full range of games that LMP pretty uniquely has out to the market? What were the motivations?
Yes, we started to go to the direct-to-consumer in the 2015. Before that, we were on the linear TV distributions. And in the 2015, we decided, as the first leagues in Italy, to embrace this kind of service. And after 7 years, it's the most important revenue channels for the leagues. So it's absolutely something that we are satisfied and we are following, we are investing year over year. We are one of the biggest league in terms of teams. We have around 92 teams with more than 1.5K matches per year, live and on demand. So this, in Italy, it's difficult for geographical meaning. It's important to know exactly how and what kind of content provide to our fan base. Our fan base is increasing year over year, and we see that now with this OTT platform, we can respond better to their needs. We analyze every month the numbers and the data about our fans, what they're looking for, what they need to know about the leagues, and provide the best content as possible, bespoke content, following their needs, etc. I just want to do a jump, to the what you mentioned before about also to go offside in global market. Now we are focused on Italy.
Yes.
We are focused on Italy. Our intention is to go and to become, the leader in Italy. In the next 2 years, this is our goal. After that, we are investing in the infrastructure, internet connection, etc. Our intention is to go to outside of Italy. Mm-hmm. It's not easy, We are doing the best, to provide the good contents, because when you go outside Italy, I think that my colleagues can agree, you have to elevate your contents, in terms of quality, in terms of everything. And yes, but this is our vision.
Well, when you have a great wealth of content, as you say, 1,500 live games a year is an extraordinary amount of content.
Yeah.
And I know in terms of our work with LMP, that that's really one of the strengths of the property. And for folks who are engaged with basketball, who love the sport, it's wonderful to be able to see the skill level that's maintained in a single country that's focused on the development of its professional basketball and the range available. It's also an interesting property in terms of its relationships with the communities, because the 92 teams are scattered all throughout the country.
Yes, and divide are two divisions, you know. When I mean two divisions, we have A2 and Serie B. So when you speak with Serie A, you have to use a different language of Serie B. And so maybe different content. So we have to divide our services. And so this balance, you know, it's not easy with 92 teams, 92 needs, 92, 92 environments. Mm-hmm. Every is different, you know. So yes, this is our strength, you know, but could be also our weaknesses if we don't pay attention, you know. That's it.
Well, one of the questions that we hear a lot from sports properties who are thinking of setting up streaming services, usually the first question is the balance of linear contracts. And Andy, our response is similar to yours, because linear licenses are straightforward checks in those markets. We always advise properties to take a look at what they can do in that linear marketplace. But without exception, every sports property has either dark spots in the map geographically or more content. For example, it's highly unlikely that any linear property is going to take 1,500 games from a league. That's an overwhelming amount. And many leagues have games that are not picked up within their linear contract. And so they have the opportunity to showcase smaller teams, increase their profile generally among sports fans by putting it out in a streaming service. How have you found the type of content to resonate between live games, which are generally given priority in most folks' marketing and programming of a service, and shoulder programming, whether it's pre-game or post-game coach interviews, lifestyle features about players, all of the things that we've come to love about the NBA, for example, Andy, and which are increasingly resonating in Europe and elsewhere in global football. What is the right mix, and how should people thinking about creating a sports property think about content mix?
So, I mean, the first point would be the vast majority, or most of these platforms I've come across for sports over the last 8 years, correct me if I'm wrong, the vast majority of consumption is live, yes. Right? It's the live games. That's what drawing people in. These tend to lean more towards avid fan products, and it's the best or only place for them to get those live games, and that's what they're spending that money for, and that's what they're consuming. So there isn't tremendous amounts of consumption, in my experience, of the kind of ancillary or shoulder content. And even, by the way, even on TV, it's kind of been going down steadily in decline for a while, with the possible exception of the NFL, which I think is such an outlier domestically, Premier League, same in the UK and a couple other markets, La Liga in Spain. So I think generally there's been that decline of shoulder programming, certainly on the dedicated sports OTT platforms, like live is definitely the big draw. That said, in order to get the economics to work, sometimes you've got to charge a fairly significant price point, right? And which avid fans are willing to pay, but there's constantly for them, for us, this value equation in their head. Like, am I getting enough value from this? Am I watching it enough? Is it? And it's a bit like the analogy of like a Equinox gym membership, right? They may have these 5, 10 different classes, which you may never use, but the fact that they have them makes you feel like I'm getting more value for money because it's there and it's available. So that's part of the thinking. And then beyond that, it's like, it's really researching what is going to resonate for this type of fan base that we have who are paying for this subscription. And that will vary within that. There's lots of different segments who are interested in lots of different things. Some could be very focused on a particular team. Some may be more broadly about the league as a whole. And that will vary very much from how people are consuming on social platforms. And we were pretty early and aggressive into social in terms of our distribution strategy there. We have very large and engaged audiences in social, for better or worse, some might say, right? But the consumption patterns and what people are looking for there is very different to what somebody might be looking for in our League Pass OTT service. And so we're actually, when we think about next gen, we are doing a lot of work thinking about non-live content, strategy, what else are we going to create and license, et cetera, to really bolster the offering.
And Fabio, you've seen content of varying lengths, varying types, as people try to fill that insatiable demand for programming. What have you seen that you found particularly interesting in recent years as content types that people should think more about?
Yeah, we basically we are transforming the company from a poor media company to a data-driven company. And Andy and Ricardo are behind the lines mentioning about the data, about what we are tracking, about how the user behaving, etc. And there are tons of data are coming from. We collect all the data from all the platforms interconnected through our ecosystem, and we pull in data from third-party sources because we believe that only with the primary sources you cannot understand fully the users, and Andy was mentioning the social media and how social media and data are important and how you connect those data, integrate into the same ecosystems. And you can finally start to understand a little bit better the users. So understanding what kind of content in what kind of region is key, right? So type of personalizations, languages, but also communication is very important. We believe that nowadays you need to communicate personally with the users. You cannot send anymore a generic email to a bunch of people. You need to target the users. You need to know exactly what Fabio Gallo is watching, where he's watching from, what kind of issue he may have, and try to help them to have a better experience. So I believe, like Andy mentioned, 90% of the people are really there because of the live streaming. So the operations in our world, in our industry, are the key elements to make things happen. How you can handle 1,500 matches per year, you can only do with a great operation, with the great platforms behind that can help at any time and everywhere to help the sport property to do a better job.
Let's dive into that a little bit more deeply, what you need from a platform, but also the importance of data to track behavior. I remember early in the life of ViewLift, and the president of our company, Manik Bamba, is here. We had a client who spent a significant amount of money setting up their version of SportsCenter, wonderful studio from which to do studio shows live. So it had that immediate impact that live does, and they were using it to fill in the holes between their live games. But the choice they had was not more of top-tier live games. They were putting all of those on naturally. What they wanted to understand was the relative performance between much smaller games, teams that had much less of a profile, but live games, versus the very current news of the moment within that sport. And you can debate endlessly about which one's going to perform better. what streaming allows you to do, and what was never available to us in the broadcast world, is you can put them up and see what the audience says. And so within a period of, I think, Monica, if I remember, less than a month, we had very, very clear data for our client that showed that they were much better off taking level 3 or even level 4 live games. They were getting much more engaged audience, longer views, and more new inbound interest, because in a service that's geared towards a passionate community, which most single sports properties, that's the basis of their appeal, the more you can give them of folks actually doing it is the key. But you need a platform partner who in the first place can handle the volume that you're talking about for LMP, which is really exceptional. You've got all the issues on the production side first and getting those games played, produced, and sent up. But then your streaming partner's got to be able to handle that for you. And you need real-time data to be able to see how they're performing. Fabio, when you speak or write within the industry, both of which you do a great deal, you always talk about the primacy of data to everything you're doing. Is that, do you think, the principal value of a DTC service? And whether it's principal or very important, what do you need from a partner, and how do you think about and utilize that kind of data?
Yeah, data is important not just to track the performance of the user inside the platforms. Data can be used during a negotiation process with a broadcaster. Data can be used in a different ways. So it's very important, first of all, to collect rightly data, right? So at La Liga, for instance, we have a customer intelligence analytics tool that we collect all the data inside one unique sort of data lake. We are able to profiling those data. We are able to, with the Fan 360 view, have a single customer view. And then we put 2 layers on top. One is to have specific dashboard, which are ready to go for our top management team. They can take very fast decision according to many information they get. They include more data on that, coming from financial data or audience data coming from Kantar, Nielsen, or any other kind of sources. And then we have another layer on top of it is the marketing. So the fan activation, the acquisition, the strategy on churn, they are always more important. So we believe that this has to be connected, and clearly data for us are, going back to your question, absolutely important. We think now as a data-driven company, not anymore as just a media company, which is a big shift because everything has to be justified with data. We are investing a lot on artificial intelligence, for instance. We don't do just OTT. We have plenty of solutions from content protection to many other steps. So we really believe that data is, and one of our models that we'll follow is the NBA. And this is why I'm a very good friend of Andy. But he's clearly one of the best league on that. So that's why La Liga is really focusing the best.
Yeah, go back to a point you made earlier, all right, around in a licensee world, the properties don't necessarily have any true visibility at the granular level of fan behaviors and tastes and motivations. Yeah, sure, you get some information back. There are third-party syndicated sources. You can do your own primary research. And that was all fine when the going was good and the checks were rolling in and they were getting bigger each time and the audiences kept on growing. Great, let's just keep on doing this. And then when it started to break a little bit, right, and audiences started to go down, the traditional models started to go down, inevitably the rights buyers are knocking on the door saying, hey, we need some relief, or, hey, it's going to be less next time around, et cetera. At that point, then it's like, oh, shit, we need to understand our fans a lot more than we do. We need the granular level, like second-by-second data on consumption, like what's happening in the game that people are switching off. They're going to do something else. Like, do we need to speed up the gameplay? That's been a big topic in MLB and NBA. Do we need to reduce the number of timeouts? So in terms of informing how we actually structure the game, that data is important. And we don't get that unless we can see it directly. So thank you for the compliment, but we, you know, for us, we're still working on putting all of the structure together to really have that fully robust 360 fan view, because, you know, a lot of the data sources are second and third party, right? And so it's a process, and getting the data is one thing. Yes, it's important, but the most important thing is then what you do with it, how you structure it, how it's utilized, how it's interpreted, and that's, you know, that's an an ongoing evolution.
Ricardo, in terms of the use of data, you've got 92 different team owners, and usually they're ownership groups, not even individuals. So now you're dealing with a kind of Italian form of the United Nations, and you've got all of the member states you've got to deal with. Is it helpful in that context to have a real flow of rich data, and how do you use that in your relationships with owners? How is that important to them? And
yes, absolutely important when we speak with 92 properties, 92 teams. You know, you have to respect, you have to find a balance, you know, of their data and our data. You know, I just take a quick example of what's happened in our leagues when we start to invest more about data and know data deeper. You know, and this is, I think, is very linked to our growth in the last years. It's to understand what kind of data, what kind of content, what kind of interest about the teams and about the owners, about the fans of the teams they were looking for. And we had surveys, we had a lot of things to understand what they were looking for. And we try to replicate in our league, because, you know, when you speak about the league, you don't speak about teams. Leagues represent the teams, but the teams are the last voice, the last hands, you know, directly to the fans. The fans follow the teams, don't follow the leagues, you know. Yeah. So this is important. We are a rights holder, but we are not directly to the fans. Yes, with our OTT now we can speak with the fans, but the fans follow the teams more than the league. So when we understood this point and understood what they were looking for their teams, their players, what they were looking for, we tried to adjust, you know, and create something bespoke following their needs. And I mean, for instance, we create a lot of behind-the-scene content. And that was amazing because it worked a lot, and we also engage more the properties of 92 teams. We engage more the teams. We engage more the fans of the teams and our fans of the OTT. So when we tried and we started to communicate with the properties and with their fans, we reached, I think, the best point, the growth. So communicate with the properties, communicate with their fans, communicate with all, you know, subjects and figures in this environment. For us, it's important. It's absolutely. You know, Rick, we work together since I think 4 years. So when we come in Italy, and you also meet some, you know, owners, etc. It's difficult to communicate that we are doing something, you know, for all the environment of the basketball in Italy.
yes,
Not just for the league, or not just for the top tier teams. You know, so.
It is a huge exercise in visibility, and that's where having a great content library and many live games is possible, but also the use of data to be able to then personalize the experience for the fan, so they can easily find the teams they're following, the players they're following, the kinds of content they want.
Involve also the players.
Yes.
And this is why also it's important to find the right, you know, technology partner, as we found in Viewlift, for instance, because it's important to go together and to involve the players in this way, as we are doing right now. Also thanks to your suggestions. Involving the teams and the players, you know, because they can attract more, you know, fans. And so creating something bespoke on these players to attract this kind of fans and supporters. That's it, yeah.
You know, Andy, you were talking about the change in the broadcast environment and the fact that the predictable escalation of rights fees for the NBA's big partners, as the audience fragmented and new technology was introduced, it became impossible to expect, even at the big league level, that you were going to see those kinds of increases continue. And so the notion of how to continue to expand the fan base and utilize new technologies to reach them became paramount. But how did the NBA respond in terms of making more content available for its fans and personalizing it based on their interest, really irrespective of what device they were consuming it on, or really what length of experience they wanted to have with the NBA, between highlights on social and short form, on lifestyle stuff and full games? How do you think about Cuisinarting the content into different size pieces for different kinds of user experiences?
Yeah, actually, one thing before I answer that specifically, first part of your question around the inevitable plateauing of rights fees for major leagues, which actually hasn't necessarily come to transpire yet for some of the real big ones. I think recently the Premier League in the UK, it was flat, deal over deal. NFL blew it out the water again. Another, forget the percent increase, but huge, right? That tends to be the
bell cow.
Yeah, exactly, in the industry. So, but it also raises an interesting question around, if you're getting more money but your audience is shrinking, is that a good or bad thing, right? And some people would say, well, okay, well, I'm in my job a few years, or the players, you know, they have a finite career, the owners, you name it, et cetera, and want to maximize the revenue for the benefit of the league and fans ultimately if the product gets better. But the mid to long-term view of that is, like, you're going to have a problem. At some point, you're going to have a problem if you just take more and more money, but you've got a shrinking audience. And I think that's where I give the NFL credit, NBA credit, in terms of thinking about how do I diversify that portfolio, still try and secure an overall greater rights fees, or combination of rights fees and direct-to-consumer revenue, but really ensure that I am protecting the health and the growth of the league across different audiences. So then specifically on your second question, how do we think about carving it up? I mean, we are, I don't want to say unique, but we're in a pretty lucky or not, depending on your point of view, position in terms of our league is really well suited to stars, big plays. There's so many games, so many plays, and having that being part of the fabric of social media has been really, you know, we've been able to ride a very good wave, and you know, the guys who ran that for however many years and run it now recognize that and know how to create and distribute in social to generate huge consumption. The challenge of that, like for anyone, is, are people satisfied then, or is there a segment or segments of your audience, your fan base, on the more casual end, who are satisfied with the fix they get?
It's the highlights.
Right, and they're good, and kind of they can, between that, NBA Twitter, 2K, whatever it is, like, I got my fix, I watch some games every now and then. Otherwise, like, I hold off until the playoffs. So we're very thoughtful about how we manage that balance, and we are thinking again about how do we do that moving forward, right? How do we continue to satisfy and serve those fans who want to consume in that way, right? It's not for us to dictate you're only a fan if you watch a full game or a certain number of full games. If a fan, and we have plenty of fans who describe themselves as 100% avid fans who know every player, every roster, you name it, but don't necessarily watch that many games. Yeah. They get their fix and get their information from other sources. So it's not for us to dictate what it is or isn't a fan, but we have to try and serve those while at the same time ensuring that we are helping helping support our traditional partners and helping grow our D2C business as well.
If I may, think you touch a very good point because I believe that content enrichment, this specific part of it, can make a huge success. So how you are able to enrich the content specifically for the rights holder and the rights owner, it's extremely important. So you really need to work around three area: fans engagement for sure, but also content enrichment and how you elevate the competition. As you know, competition go up, more revenue are generated by the traction of broadcaster from one side, sponsor from the other, etc. And that pass through, in my opinion, to elevate and enrich the content all the time with, again, data venting, data consumptions inside the video player, statistics, and engaging still more with the avid fans.
In this process of finding out what fans need and want, extending their experience with your brands, and monetizing it, one gets to the business models of the leagues themselves and the business models behind your streaming services. One of the things that we did very deliberately when we started building out the ViewLift platform was allow our clients to make that choice, whatever business model you wanted to follow. And it's been interesting to see leagues experiment with pay-per-view for certain of the big games, with full season passes, partial season passes, individual game buys, all sorts of different options, as well as advertising-based platforms. And how do you advise smaller leagues to think about that process of picking one or more business models to follow to try to get the highest possible yield for the league itself, which is its objective, while giving choices to fans?
We in LMP had a very interesting growth when we changed and we used different kind of business model. I mean, we started as a subscription with on-demand, and in Italy it's the most popular business model. So it's also important to know your country, you know your fans, you know your fan base. You know? The country is important to understand what the people are used to pay, how they used to pay. So we started in the 2015 with the subscription with on-demand. Then we added pay-per-view solutions, and this helped a lot, you know, a lot, because I think that's also to change and to use different kind of business model can be also marketing strategies to attract more fans and more new potential customers. Maybe investing on the best matches to launch a new pay-per-view business model. And also, during the years, using different offers as Black Friday or half-season pass, with Fabio, that worked also for LMP, know how many plans we used in the years to embrace as more fans possible. And yeah, so my suggestion is to try following absolutely your country and your fan base, understand what are the habits and what are the environment, and to use different kind of business model, absolutely.
When you go into different countries, again, we talked about the La Liga pass in Thailand and Indonesia. As you go into other markets where you have the ability to do that in your linear contract, or you don't have a linear contract at a particular point in time, how do you think about looking at different business models?
Yeah. So from my point of view, creating OTT specifically for small leagues and federations is a big opportunity first. And what they are normally failing is not to think it as a community, right? So for instance, we launched at the end of November a small federation, World Padel Tour, right? I guess it's starting to be popular as well here in the US. and World Padel Tour didn't have an OTT. In the first 3 months, we registered more than 500,000 users.
Really?
Really. And now the federation is starting to think about going on subscription or going on a pay-per-view basis, etc. Because the real first point is really to create a community, a solid community, giving the content for free, clearly including advertisements, sponsorship agreements, etc. And then step by step, you may think to go with another kind of business model. La Liga Sport TV, that is another platform that we launched previously to La Liga Pass. That is a sort of collection of multi-sports, very, very different, with a variety of sports. We have now 3 million users registered in the platforms. In last 3-4 months, the president decided to go direct to consumer with, a subscription solution. So that would be an angle to look at it. It's great first community, and then start to monetize when the community start to be important.
Have you seen rights owners run into difficulties because they get onto a streaming platform that really only offers one business model, and then conditions change either geographically or over time, where they don't have the ability to then add on fastly, and they've got to kind of go start over?
Yeah, so again, it really depends on the strategy at the end of the day of the sport property. We are used in the US or in Europe to think about launching subscription services, because it's what basically input from Netflix, from the big guys, right? Netflix, Disney, and so on. But we are forgetting probably that most of the countries in the world, thinking about Latin America, thinking about Asia, thinking about Middle East, which still community is not so there, and they have to focus, like in the US or in Europe, we were focusing until 5-6 years ago on the advertisement. So they need to create the community first, and then they are able to monetize. Yeah.
A lot of ways we can go off of that pivot, but we have a fairly short period of time left in the session, and we want to take questions from the floor. So if you'd raise your hand, we'll circulate a microphone and take some questions from you. Anybody want to go first? Don't make the teacher call on you. While you're thinking about that, let's continue off the notion of creating community and go back to a point, Andy, that you mentioned, which is the capacity to get a 360-degree view of a fan. We've had an interesting perspective because our chairman, Ted Leonsis, owns an NBA team, an NHL team, a WNBA team, esports teams, and others. And from an owner's perspective, your principal asset is that fan. And you've got one contract with the ticketing service, you have a different contract with your merchandise, you may have a number of linear licenses out there, your own OTT service. It's very similar to the issue I think La Liga confronted at a league level of how do we pull all of the data from all of these points in together and be able to understand what the fan's journey is, because they were seeing that same fan in these discrete still photos rather than kind of a video of the entire life and journey of their fandom. How did La Liga go about that process of trying to better understand all of these sources of data?
Well, the first thing, we started to interconnect all the digital assets. So the asset, we normally think as a single asset, as a silo with their own analytics, their own analytics tools, completely separated website from OTT to gamification, etc. So first thing is interconnection to all the digital assets, one unique data lake, and then we started, like Andy mentioned, to work on the 360 fan view, right? In my opinion, when it's about attracting new users, you really need to think how you also start potential new activation or fan activations activities, right? because at the end of the day, you can launch the best OTT ever. We can create, the biggest community ever. But if you're not able then to monetize those community, it's kind of tricky, right? So, and you can do only with, like I think you mentioned before, a personalized experience with, as I mentioned before, a personal communication to the end users. You can do with, specific sponsor campaigns. We launched, for instance, a campaign that was very, very profitable with Burger King. And we were targeting specifically people with a specific age that were looking for this kind of product, and the sponsor made 3 million ROI in a weekend. So yeah, with few registered users, few thousands registered users. So there are possibilities to go beyond the subscription. There are possibilities to go beyond that, but you need to have data strategy in place. If not that.
Strategy and the technology. And you don't have to make a single choice, either temporally. I mean, you can start and try one opportunity in one business model, but you can also run a number of business models concurrently, as long as you've got the tech backbone that allows you to do that and the data analytics that compares relative results. Again, I want to offer the opportunity if anybody's had a question there.
With such broad brand awareness, are there audience segments globally that you would like to still try to reach into that are hard to target?
I think the unequivocal answer is yes, but let's break that down into parts. Could everybody hear the question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to go first. So we still think we've got quite a lot of headroom in terms of awareness in a lot of markets of the NBA, but really like penetrating in terms of it becoming part of a sports or basketball fans' weekly or daily habit. So we have the challenge in a lot of markets where the time zone doesn't work in our favor. Most of our games are at night, and so for most of EMEA, that's not particularly favorable. But putting that to one side, yeah, we believe that there's quite a lot of growth potential for the sport of basketball generally, as well as the NBA specifically. And then additionally, we, like many sports properties and other brands and organizations, we are looking at, Gen Z, we are looking at Gen Alpha, and like, what is it that is going to continually hook them into consuming and having the passion and love for our sport and for our league and for our teams and our players, as their tastes and behaviors continue to change, right? And that's the biggest challenge I think we're all facing. Is my biggest concern for sports and sports media is that we've become more and more of a avid fan only offering, and we lose some of the connection to the more general fan base. And so I think that's where a lot of our efforts are focused.
If you think about what drove streaming in the first instance, it was largely an effort to try to pick up younger fans who were cutting the cord or never entering into a relationship with a cable or satellite company, and were doing a la carte program selection themselves via IP streaming. That was driven because of exactly the process that you asked about, identifying the younger fan base that every brand, sports or otherwise, has to find a way to communicate with if they want to stay alive, stay vital.
I'd expand that to, it was about serving underserved fan needs, right? So we had a bunch of games domestically out of market which weren't being utilized, and we knew and we know that we have a sizable fan base who live out of their home market, Celtics fans in Vegas or whatever. There's a lot of data that shows those are sizable audiences. So that was a real specific opportunity to address an underserved segment or segments, and then the same internationally, where we knew that there was a lot, not just US expats. There was a very large basketball community and NBA fans who weren't being served, and this was an opportunity to serve us. So yeah, part of it is about those who were sidestepping the traditional pay TV landscape, but a lot of it was about, you know, an opportunity to serve those needs.
I remember a survey that we conducted when I was running Sporting News. And with respect to NFL fans, at least, more than 50% were out of market. And this is more than a decade ago, and that was an accelerating trend. So it's considerably bigger, I think, now in that sport and with most. Which leaves us, I guess, with one final question about streaming services, and that is often asked by content owners who are contemplating launching a service. And that's what is the max consumption? How many services are people willing to sign up for and pay for? Here in the United States, in 2019, about a third of households had 3 or more subscription service, pay subscription services. This year, that number's 58%. And the amount of viewing continues to go up. It's been 18 to 20% a year. So I just will go around as kind of the last question. Do you think that there is a predictable upper level of the number of services any individual or household will subscribe to, or is it a question of relative value, and as long as each individual service makes its appeal as any other product? I mean, we never ask, can we have too many we may ask, can we have too many consumer goods in our house, but that's from a different angle. Do you think there's an upper limit on streaming? Why don't we just go around?
Yeah, I think there inevitably is, and actually, if you want to give yourself a shot, go into your Apple subscriptions and look at how many things you're subscribed to that you didn't realize or you forgot that you signed up to a free trial. I did that recently, and that was scary. So I think there's an upper limit, but ultimately, I don't think it will matter, because I think inevitable rebundling is going to happen, where telcos, the digital platforms are just going to offer multiple services in a package, and so you won't have to worry about, I mean, you should always worry about how much you're spending, but you won't have to worry about managing 5, 10, 15 different subscriptions. You know, it will come as, you know, you'll pick the ones you want, and it'll come centralized. And clearly Apple and Amazon and others are going down that route.
Yeah, I tend a little bit to disagree, because we always say that there will be a merge of players, etc. I foresee actually the reverse. I foresee there will be more niche leagues or competition that we go direct to consumer with their own propositions, because at the end of the day is again a way of creating community. It's a way to understand fans, and then of course you can start as a property to understand if you can go direct to consumer in specific market, or you want to partner with a bigger brand, have a bigger exposure. But you know,
just to be clear, though, I'm not saying that instead of going direct to consumer, I'm saying your direct-to-consumer offering will be part of a bigger bundle. So from a consumer perspective, they're not thinking about
like a telco,
multiple.
Exactly. So.
Yes, from my point of view, it's great, and I agree and align with what my colleagues said. But for example, in LMP now we are embrace different kind of also maybe to enter, you know, in a multi-content platform, as could be Amazon or something like that. We have our OTT platform, but why not? We can change, and we can also distribute different kind of channels, you know.
I'll leave it there because we're at time. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. If you have questions that you want to ask the panelists afterwards, please come on up and enjoy the rest of the show.